There are some structures on this earth that seem to vibrate with a power that is not entirely of this world. They are not just stone and mortar. They are anchors, pinning the veil between our reality and a past so deep it feels like mythology. They are silent enigmas that have outlasted the civilizations that built them, the languages they spoke, and the gods they worshipped. They stand as a testament to an idea, a challenge posed to the future, a question carved into the very landscape of our planet. And tonight we journey to the foot of the greatest of them all. Imagine leaving the chaotic, horn-blaring, vibrant life of modern Cairo. You travel west, and slowly, the concrete jungle gives way to the endless, shimmering expanse of the desert. And then, through the heat haze, you see them. At first, they are just geometric shapes, perfect triangles on the horizon. They don't seem real. They look like a matte painting, a glitch in the simulation. But as you get closer, their scale begins to assert itself. They grow and keep growing until they consume the entire sky. You are standing now on the Giza Plateau. The sun beats down with an ancient, unforgiving intensity. The air is thick with the dust of millennia. And before you, rising from the sand like a god's own weapon, is the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is not a building. It is a geological event. It is a mountain that has been captured, tamed, and sharpened to a perfect, celestial point. You walk towards its base, and the sheer verticality of it is dizzying. You feel an almost primal sense of vertigo, not from being up high, but from being so small. You reach out a hand and touch the stone. It's a massive block of limestone, warm from the sun, almost humming with latent energy. You are touching a stone that was hewn from the earth and placed in this exact spot by another human being 4,500 years ago. A worker who lived in a world without iron tools, without steel cables, without engines, without cranes, without any of the technology we consider fundamental to building a garden shed, let alone a 48-story skyscraper of solid rock. And as you stand there, utterly dwarfed, a question begins to form in your mind. It's a question that has obsessed emperors and conquerors, scientists and mystics, engineers and dreamers for 2,000 years. It's a question that has spawned 1,000 theories, from the brilliant to the absurd. It is, perhaps, the greatest engineering whodunit in human history. The question is not who built it. We know it was the Egyptians of the 4th dynasty, under the reign of the pharaoh Khufu. It's not why they built it. We know it was a sacred tomb, a resurrection machine designed to launch the soul of the God King into the immortal stars. No, the question that echoes from these stones is much simpler and infinitely more profound. How? How did they do it? How did a Bronze Age civilization, with tools of soft copper and stone, quarry, lift, and assemble over 2 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as a space shuttle, with a precision that would make a modern-day laser surveyor weep with envy? This is not a simple historical inquiry. This is one of the deepest archaeological mysteries we have ever faced. It's a direct confrontation with a level of achievement in ancient Egypt that seems to fly in the face of all our preconceived notions about the ancient world. It is a cold case 4,500 years old, where the only witness is a mountain of stone that refuses to give up all its secrets. Tonight, we become the investigators. We will sift through the evidence, from the dust of the quarries to the hidden chambers deep within. We will analyze the theories, from the mainstream to the wildly speculative. And we will attempt to reconstruct, piece by agonizing piece, how humanity accomplished its most audacious and enduring act of creation. The mystery of pyramids construction isn't just about ramps and ropes. It's about a lost world of genius and a level of sophisticated ancient technology that we are only just beginning to understand. Before we can even begin to ask how, we have to fully wrap our minds around the what. The scale of the Great Pyramid of Khufu is so astronomical that numbers and statistics almost fail to convey the reality. But we have to try. The pyramid is constructed from an estimated 2.3 million individual blocks of stone. Let that number sink in. 2.3 million. If you were to lay those blocks end to end, they would stretch for thousands of miles. The average block weighs about 2.5 tons. That's the weight of a large pickup truck. And that's just the average. The truly mind-boggling stones are the ones hidden from view. Deep in the heart of the pyramid, forming the ceiling of the king's chamber, are 9 colossal granite beams. Each one weighs between 50 and 80 tons. 80 tons. That is the weight of a modern battle tank, or about 40 cars stacked on top of each other. And they were lifted over 150 feet into the air and placed with millimeter precision. The total weight of the structure is estimated at nearly 6 million tons. That's more building material than is contained in every single cathedral and church in England, combined. For 3,871 years, it was the tallest man-made structure on the face of the earth, a record that stood unchallenged until a slender spire was placed on top of Lincoln Cathedral in England in the year 1311. But the real miracle of the pyramid isn't its size. It's the precision. The base covers 13.1 acres, yet it is an almost perfect square. The lengths of the 4 sides at the base have a mean error of just a couple of inches. It is aligned to the 4 cardinal directions: true north, south, east, and west, with an accuracy of less than 4 arc minutes, or 1/15 of a single degree. This is a feat of celestial alignment so accurate that it wasn't surpassed until the modern age of telescopic astronomy. How do you do that? How do you survey and lay out a foundation of that magnitude on a rocky, uneven desert plateau with that kind of supernatural accuracy, using what we believe were simple sighting rods and plumb bobs? It's an act of engineering so sublime, so far beyond what we think should have been possible, that it naturally invites us to question everything we think we know. It feels like a magic trick performed on a planetary scale. For centuries, the world had a simple, brutal, and grim explanation for this trick: slaves. The image is seared into our collective consciousness, largely thanks to Hollywood epics like the Ten Commandments. We see a cruel, decadent pharaoh on his throne. We see a whip-cracking overseer, his face a mask of sadistic glee. And we see hundreds of thousands of miserable, sweat-soaked slaves, straining under the desert sun, dragging impossible loads, dying in their droves, their bodies cast aside to build a monument to a single man's vanity. It's a powerful and convenient narrative. It explains the impossible scale by invoking an impossible degree of human suffering. And for the longest time, it's what most of the world believed. It is also almost completely, demonstrably wrong. One of the single most important archaeological discoveries of the 20th century has been the unearthing of the pyramid builder's own city, a sprawling settlement nestled on the Giza Plateau, just a stone's throw from the pyramids themselves. Led by pioneering archaeologists like Mark Lehner and Zahi Hawass, decades of painstaking excavation have revealed a lost world. And what they found there was not the squalid camp of slaves, but a highly organized, purpose-built city for a massive, rotating workforce. They discovered not slave pits, but organized barracks capable of housing thousands of workers in relative comfort. They found huge bakeries with industrial-scale ovens that could produce thousands of loaves of bread every day. They found breweries because beer was a staple of the Egyptian diet and a form of payment. Most tellingly, they found mountains of animal bones. Analysis showed that the workers were being fed a diet rich in protein. Vast quantities of fish from the Nile, sheep, goat, and most surprisingly, prime beef. In ancient Egypt, cattle were a sign of immense wealth. This wasn't the diet of a disposable slave class. This was the diet of valued, skilled professionals. Even more poignant was the discovery of the workers' cemetery. Here, they found the remains of the men and women who died building the pyramids. Forensic analysis of their skeletons tells a vivid story. They suffered from the predictable injuries of dangerous, heavy labor-strained backs, crushed limbs, degenerative arthritis. But they also show signs of having been treated. They found bones that had been set in splints and had healed. They even found evidence of successful amputations and what appears to be brain surgery. These were not people who were worked to death and thrown into a pit. These were citizens who were cared for, whose lives were valued. This discovery single-handedly rewrote the story of the pyramids. They were not built by slaves. They were built by a dedicated, well-fed, and highly motivated national workforce. These were farmers who were idle during the months of the annual Nile flood, the Ake, when their fields were underwater. They would travel to Giza to offer their labor as a form of national service, a kind of religious tax. They were building a sacred project, a stairway to heaven for their king, who was their living connection to the gods. They believed that by ensuring his eternal journey, they were ensuring the eternal stability and prosperity of their entire world. The pyramid was not a monument to a tyrant. It was a national act of faith, built with pride. But this profound, humanizing discovery only deepens the central mystery. It replaces one miracle, the miracle of inhuman cruelty, with another. The miracle of human ingenuity, organization, and collective will. So let's set our scene. We have our workforce. Tens of thousands of skilled, proud Egyptians. We have their toolkit recovered from the sands. Soft copper chisels, hard dolerite stone pounders, wooden mallets, flax ropes, and simple but effective surveying tools like A-frame levels and plumb bobs. And we have their mission, handed down from the divine pharaoh himself, to build a literal mountain on the edge of the desert. How, step by agonizing step, did they pull it off? Our investigation must begin where the pyramid itself began, in the quarries. Where did 2.3 million blocks of stone, weighing a total of 6 million tons, actually come from? The pyramid is composed of 3 main types of stone, and each tells a different part of the story. The vast bulk of the pyramid, its core structure, is made from a yellowish, relatively soft nummulitic limestone. The genius of the pyramid's architects was that this stone was quarried right there on the Giza Plateau itself, in massive pits located just a few hundred yards to the south. You can still see the huge, scooped-out depressions today. This was a logistical masterstroke. They had their primary building material, millions of tons of it, right on the construction site, eliminating the need for complex, long-distance transport for the majority of the blocks. But the pyramid we see today is a pale, stripped-down ghost of its former self. When it was first completed, the Great Pyramid wasn't a rough, tiered, sand-colored structure. It was encased in a skin of highly polished, brilliant white limestone from the quarries at Tura, across the Nile. There were an estimated 144,000 of these casing stones, each one cut with incredible precision and fitted together so perfectly that you couldn't insert a knife blade between them. The entire pyramid would have shone in the desert sun like a giant, gleaming white jewel, a beacon visible for miles around. An Arab historian who saw it before it was stripped of its casing stones wrote that it shone like the moon or the sun. This fine Tura limestone had to be quarried, ferried across the Nile, and then fitted to the pyramid's exterior. And then there's the granite. The granite is the real monster of the operation. Deep in the pyramid's heart, forming the structural walls and ceiling of the king's chamber, are those colossal 50 to 80-ton blocks of pink Aswan granite. This stone is incredibly hard, far harder than limestone. And it didn't come from anywhere near Giza. It was quarried in Aswan, over 500 miles to the south, deep in southern Egypt. So we have our first set of mysteries. How do you cut millions of stone blocks from the earth with what are essentially Bronze Age tools? How do you achieve the smooth, flat surfaces required for the casing stones. And how in the world do you quarry, cut, and shape granite, one of the hardest stones on Earth, using chisels made of copper, a metal so soft you can bend it with your hands? For the limestone, the process was a monumental feat of labor, but it is understandable. The workers would cut deep channels into the bedrock using their copper chisels and heavy wooden mallets. This was a process of attrition. Copper chisels would blunt quickly and need to be constantly resharpened by teams of smiths working in forges right at the quarry. Once the channels were cut, the prevailing theory is that they would drive wooden wedges into slots they had made in the stone. They would then pour water on the wedges. As the dry would absorb the water and swelled, it would exert enormous, irresistible pressure, cracking the massive block of stone and freeing it from the quarry wall. It was slow, back-breaking, relentless work, but it was possible. The granite, however, is a different beast entirely. A copper chisel on a block of granite is useless. It would be like trying to cut a diamond with a piece of chalk. So how did they manage it? The answer lies in a simple but profound principle. To work a hard material, you need a harder material. The Egyptians found that material in dolerite, a type of dark, igneous rock that is even harder than granite. Archaeologists have found large, rounded dolerite pounders, some weighing over 12 pounds, scattered around the Aswan quarries. The theory is that teams of workers, perhaps dozens of them, would stand on top of a block of granite and relentlessly, rhythmically, pound at the surface with these dolerite balls. For hours, days, weeks. Slowly, painstakingly, they would pulverize the granite, crushing it into dust, creating a trench around the block they wanted to free. Another, more sophisticated theory, backed by compelling evidence, involves the use of copper saws and drills, but with a secret weapon: abrasive slurry. Quartz sand is extremely hard and sharp on a microscopic level. The idea is that a large copper saw, which is too soft to cut granite on its own, can be used as a blade to carry the abrasive. As a team of men worked the saw back and forth in a groove, another man would continuously pour a slurry of water and quartz sand into the cut. It would be the sand, not the copper, that was doing the cutting, grinding its way through the crystalline structure of the granite. The same principle would apply to drills. A copper tube, rotated by a bow, could drill a perfect core out of a block of granite if sand and water were constantly fed into the hole. This isn't just a theory. Egyptologist Dennis Stocks and others have conducted numerous experiments, recreating these techniques. They have proven that it is possible to cut and drill granite with this method. It just takes an incredible amount of time and effort. It is a testament not to some lost super technology, but to a level of patience and perseverance that is almost unimaginable to us in our age of instant gratification. In Aswan, there is a giant, frozen crime scene that gives us our best look at their methods. It is the unfinished obelisk. It's a single, colossal piece of granite, over 137 feet long, and weighing an estimated 1,200 tons, the weight of 3 Boeing 747s. It was abandoned mid-quarry after a fatal flaw. A large crack was discovered in the stone. It lies there still, tethered to the bedrock by a thin spine of rock, a silent testament to their ambition and their heartbreak. You can stand in the trench around it, a trench dug by hand with dolerite pounders. You can see the scoop marks. You can feel the sheer, mind-numbing human effort that went into trying to free this monster from the earth. It is one of the most powerful and humbling archaeological sites in the world, a monument to a magnificent failure that teaches us more about their success than any finished product ever could. So they've quarried the blocks, the millions of tons of limestone from Giza, the gleaming white casing stones from Tura, and the colossal granite beams from Aswan, 500 miles away. Now comes the second great act of this engineering epic: transportation. How do you move mountains? For the limestone quarried at Giza, the problem was minimized. But even moving a 2.5-ton block a few hundred yards is a monumental task. For the Tura limestone and especially the Aswan granite, the challenge was immense. The most accepted theory, backed by a wealth of evidence from tomb paintings and archaeological finds, is that they used a combination of giant wooden sledges and boats. We've all seen the images of teams of men straining on ropes, dragging a huge stone block on a sledge. For a long time, it was assumed they simply dragged these sledges over the loose sand, a task that would require colossal amounts of manpower due to the incredible friction. But a few years ago, a team of physicists from the University of Amsterdam made a remarkable discovery that revealed the subtle genius of the ancient Egyptians. Through experimentation, they found that if you add a specific small amount of water to sand, it becomes firm and dramatically reduces the friction on a sliding sledge. Too little water and the sand stays loose. Too much and it turns to mud. But just the right amount and the force needed to pull the sledge is cut in half. Suddenly, a famous tomb painting from the tomb of Jehuti-Hotep, which had long puzzled Egyptologists, made perfect sense. It shows a team of men dragging a colossal statue on a sledge. And standing at the front of the sledge is a single man, pouring a liquid onto the sand in its path. For centuries, scholars had assumed this was a ceremonial act, a ritual purification. Now, we understand he was a crucial member of the engineering team, a human lubrication system, applying a sophisticated principle of physics to make the impossible possible. This is a perfect example of advanced ancient technology that doesn't involve alien lasers, but a deep, practical understanding of the natural world. The problem of moving the granite from Aswan, 500 miles away, was solved by the lifeblood of Egypt, the Nile River. The Egyptians were master boat builders and sailors. They would have loaded the multi-ton granite blocks onto massive barges, likely several lashed together, and floated them north towards Giza. They would have timed these journeys to coincide with the annual inundation. When the Nile flooded its banks, the current was slower, and the water level was high enough to navigate more easily. But this still left a crucial puzzle. The Nile is over 5 miles from the Giza Plateau. How did they get the blocks from the river to the pyramid itself? Did they drag them for miles across the desert on sledges? The answer, it seems, is no. And our definitive proof for this is one of the most stunning archaeological finds of the 21st century. The Papyrus of Mirror, discovered in 2013 by a French team excavating caves near the Red Sea. It is the personal logbook, the diary of a man named Mirror. Mirror was a foreman, a captain of a crew, in charge of about 40 elite workers during the 26th year of the reign of the pharaoh Khufu. It is the only first-hand, eyewitness account of the pyramid's construction ever found. Reading the translation is a chilling, electrifying experience. It is like hearing a clear voice speak to you across a gulf of 4,500 years. Mirror's job was not building the pyramid itself. His team was tasked with transporting the fine white Tura limestone casing stones to the Giza site, and his diary describes in meticulous day-by-day detail how they did it. He records picking up the blocks at the Tura quarries. He talks about loading them onto his boat. And then he describes sailing not just on the Nile, but through a system of man-made canals that diverted the river's water inland. He writes about sailing right up to the base of the pyramid and delivering his cargo at a harbor he calls Roshi Khufu, the Lake of Khufu. This incredible document confirmed what archaeologists like Mark Leaner had long suspected from their survey work. The Egyptians hadn't dragged the blocks over miles of sand. They had brought the water to the pyramid. They had undertaken a massive civil engineering project, dredging a complex network of canals and a huge artificial port at the foot of the Giza Plateau. This allowed them to deliver their multi-ton cargo, floated on barges, right to the doorstep of the construction site. It was an act of landscape engineering every bit as impressive as the pyramid itself. Okay, so we've done it. We've quarried the blocks. We've transported them to the site. Now we face the final act, the climax, the biggest, most controversial, and most mind-bending mystery of them all. How did they get the blocks up? How do you lift a 2.5-ton block of limestone, let alone an 80-ton block of granite, nearly 500 feet into the air using nothing but muscle power, ropes, and wood? This is the absolute heart of the mystery of pyramids construction. This is the question that has spawned dozens of competing theories, from the simple to the sublimely complex to the completely bizarre. Let's begin with the theory that seems the most obvious, the one you'll find in most children's books and older documentaries. They built a giant ramp. The idea of a single, long, straight external ramp, leading from the ground all the way to the top of the pyramid, is the most intuitive solution. As the pyramid grew taller, the ramp grew longer and higher. Teams of workers would drag the blocks up the slope on their sledges, pull them into position, and then head back down for the next one. It's a simple, elegant idea, and it almost certainly has to be wrong, at least for the entire height of the pyramid. The problem is one of simple physics and brutal logistics. For a ramp to be usable by men dragging multi-ton blocks, it can't be too steep. A reasonable, sustained gradient would be about 8 to 10%. For the Great Pyramid, which stood at about 481 feet, an 8% ramp would need to be over a mile long. The sheer volume of material needed to build such a ramp, be it mud brick, rubble, or sand, would be immense, possibly even greater than the volume of the pyramid itself. It would have been a project on the scale of building a second sloping pyramid next to the first one. And where did all that material go when the project was finished? There is no archaeological trace of such a colossal structure in the surrounding desert. A single, straight ramp just doesn't seem feasible. So, if not a straight ramp, what about a different kind of external ramp? This leads us to theory number 2, a zigzag or switchback ramp. Instead of extending for a mile into the desert, this type of ramp would have been built up against one of the faces of the pyramid, climbing back and forth. This would use far less material and keep the construction footprint contained. It's a much more plausible idea, but it has its own significant problems. The corners. How do you maneuver a 20-foot-long sledge carrying a multi-ton block around a tight, 180-degree hairpin turn on a narrow ramp hundreds of feet in the air? It would have been a logistical nightmare, a bottleneck that would have slowed construction to a crawl, especially when dealing with the larger blocks. This is where the theories start to get really clever and really fascinating. Frustrated by the seemingly insurmountable problems with external ramps, a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin decided to approach the problem from a completely different perspective. For years, he dedicated his life and his own money to obsessively studying the Great Pyramid, not as an archaeologist looking at the past, but as a builder looking at a practical problem. He asked himself, if I had to build this with their tools and their knowledge, how would I do it? And in 2007, after years of 3D modeling and structural analysis, he unveiled a revolutionary theory that has shaken the world of Egyptology to its core. Houdin's theory is this: the Egyptians used 2 ramps. The first was a short, straight external ramp, but one that only went up to about the first third of the pyramid's height, roughly 150 to 200 feet. This initial ramp would have been used to bring in the truly massive granite blocks for the king's chamber, which is located at about that height. It solves the heavy lifting problem early on. Once that bottom third of the pyramid was complete and the monster blocks were in place, Houdin believes they dismantled this external ramp and recycled its materials to build the upper levels of the pyramid. So how did they build the top 2/3? This is the stroke of genius in his idea. He believes they built the second ramp, but they built it inside the pyramid. An internal corkscrew ramp that spiraled its way up through the body of the pyramid, just behind the outer walls. As they built each new layer of the pyramid, They would also be building the next section of this internal tunnel. The workers would drag the standard 2.5-ton blocks up this enclosed, gently sloping corridor to the active construction level. It is an incredibly elegant and powerful theory. It explains why there's no evidence of a giant external ramp because it was never there. It explains how they could efficiently move millions of blocks without creating a secondary structure larger than the pyramid itself. It keeps the entire operation compact and self-contained. But is there any evidence for it? This is where it gets truly exciting. Howden's theory is not just speculation. It is testable. First, he pointed to a strange notch or small room located high up on one of the pyramid's corners. Mainstream Egyptology had no good explanation for it. Houdin theorized that this was an open area at one of the switchback corners of the internal ramp, left open to allow workers to use a simple crane to pivot the blocks. In the 1980s, long before Houdin proposed his theory, a French survey team performing a microgravimetry analysis of the pyramid reported finding a strange, low-density, spiral-shaped anomaly inside the structure exactly where Houdin's ramp would be. Their findings were largely dismissed at the time as anomalous data, but Howden's theory gives them a stunning new context. More recently, the ongoing Scan Pyramids project has been using advanced, non-invasive technology-immuine tomography, which uses cosmic rays to detect voids in solid structure to create a map of the pyramid's interior. In 2017, they announced a bombshell discovery. A massive, previously unknown void, at least 100 feet long, located directly above the magnificent Grand Gallery. Could this big void be a part of the internal construction system? A space that was part of Howden's ramp, or part of a different internal mechanism? The research is ongoing, but the possibility that we are on the verge of confirming a secret, internal structure inside the Great Pyramid is electrifying. Howden's theory also offers a clever solution for lifting those 80-ton granite beams for the King's Chamber. He suggests that the Grand Gallery, that magnificent, soaring, high-ceilinged corridor leading up to the King's Chamber, was not just a beautiful but empty ceremonial passageway. He believes it was a key piece of ancient technology. It was, in effect, a machine. He theorizes that it housed a system of counterweights on a trolley or rail system. A massive weight would be slid down the steep slope of the gallery's floor, and through a system of ropes and pulleys, its downward momentum would be used to provide the crucial extra power needed to haul the giant granite blocks up the external ramp. It's a beautiful piece of applied physics. Howden's internal ramp theory is currently the most compelling, logical, and comprehensive explanation we have for the construction of the upper portions of the pyramid. But it's not the only game in town. There are other, more radical theories. One of these is the geopolymer or concrete theory, championed by the French chemist Joseph Davidovits. He proposes that the Egyptians didn't lift most of the blocks at all. Instead, he argues they cast them in place like modern concrete. He suggests that they took weathered, crumbly limestone, mixed it with binders like kaolin clay, salt, and lime, carried this slurry up the pyramid in buckets, and then packed it into wooden molds to harden into solid blocks. This would eliminate the problems of quarrying hard stone and lifting immense weights. The evidence for this theory is primarily chemical. Davidovits claims to have found microscopic organic fibers and anomalous chemical signatures in some pyramid blocks that suggest they are not natural stone. It's a fascinating idea, but it has been widely rejected by geologists and Egyptologists, who have conducted their own analyses and concluded that the blocks are, in fact, carved from natural sedimentary limestone. The debate, however, highlights the willingness of scientists to think outside the box to solve this ancient puzzle. And now, we must turn our attention to the theory that looms over every single discussion of the pyramids. The theory that has launched 1,000 television shows and sold millions of books. We have to address the elephant in the room, or perhaps, the flying saucer hovering silently over the Giza plateau. What if the Egyptians didn't build them at all? Not on their own anyway. This is, of course, the ancient astronaut or ancient aliens theory. The core argument is one of incredulity. The pyramids, it is claimed, are so massive, so precise, so mathematically sophisticated, and so far beyond the capabilities of a Bronze Age society, that the only logical explanation is that they had help. Help from an advanced extraterrestrial civilization that visited Earth in our remote past. Proponents of this theory point to the same list of mysteries we've been discussing: the scale, the precision, the weight of the granite blocks, and declare them humanly impossible. They hunt for anomalies in Egyptian art and artifacts. They point to the so-called Dendra light, a carving in a temple at Dendra that they claim depicts a giant electric light bulb, complete with a filament and a power cord, as evidence of advanced electrical knowledge. They point to the perfectly flat surfaces and sharp, 90-degree internal corners found in some granite boxes, particularly in the underground labyrinth of the Serapeum at Saqqara, and claim they could only have been made with advanced machine tools. The appeal of this theory is undeniable. It's a simple, elegant, and incredibly dramatic solution to a very complex problem. It cuts through all the messy, difficult work of archaeology, experimental physics, and engineering analysis with a single, grand, science fiction narrative. But does it hold up to even the slightest scrutiny? The Dendra light bulb is, according to every single mainstream Egyptologist, a well-understood and standard piece of Egyptian mythology. It depicts a snake, a symbol of creation, emerging from a lotus flower, a symbol of rebirth, all enclosed within a bubble of creative energy, representing the dawn of the world. It has absolutely nothing to do with electricity. The precision cuts in the granite, while breathtakingly skillful, have been shown by experimental archaeologists like Dennis Stocks to be achievable with patience, skill, and the simple abrasive techniques we discussed earlier. It takes a lot longer than using a diamond-tipped power saw, but it is not impossible. The fundamental, fatal flaw in the ancient alien theory is that it is an argument from ignorance, and a deeply pessimistic one at that. It takes the position that if I, in my modern wisdom, cannot immediately imagine how they did it, then they could not have done it. It is, in a strange way, deeply insulting to the brilliance of our own ancestors. It seeks to rob them of their single greatest achievement. Isn't it far more incredible, far more awe-inspiring, to believe that we, as a species, accomplished this? That a civilization thousands of years ago, through sheer brain power, collective will, and relentless dedication, managed to build these wonders that still challenge us today. The pyramids are not a testament to the power of alien visitors. They are a monument to the limitless potential of the human spirit. A related fringe theory is the lost civilization hypothesis, popularized by authors like Graham Hancock. This suggests that the pyramids were built not by the dynastic Egyptians we know, but by a much older, more technologically advanced human civilization, a real-life Atlantis that was wiped out by some global catastrophe, like a comet impact or a great flood, around 12,000 years ago. The dynastic Egyptians, this theory proposes, simply found these magnificent, ancient structures, recognized their power, and built their own, lesser copies around them. Again, it's a compelling, romantic story. It speaks to our deep-seated fascination with the idea of a lost golden age. But like the alien theory, it suffers from a complete and total lack of supporting evidence. Archaeologically, the pyramids of Giza fit perfectly within the timeline and cultural evolution of ancient Egypt's Old Kingdom. We have the workers' village. We have the foreman's diary. We have the surrounding tombs of the officials and architects who oversaw the work. The story the physical evidence tells is one of incredible Egyptian achievement, not of inherited technology from a vanished super race. So, after our long, winding investigation, where do we stand? We have journeyed from the quarries of Aswan to the shores of the Lake of Khufu. We have sifted through theories mainstream, brilliant, and bizarre. Can we now say with absolute certainty exactly how the Great Pyramid was built? The honest answer is no. Not with 100% certainty. We don't have the blueprints. The Egyptians, for all their meticulous record-keeping, never left us a How to Build a Pyramid for Dummies manual. But we are closer than we have ever been. We can say with confidence that it was not slaves who built them, but a proud and skilled national workforce, motivated by faith. We can say with confidence that they used a sophisticated system of canals and boats to transport the stone. We can say with confidence that they were masters of logistics and understood complex principles of engineering and physics. And when it comes to the final great question of how they got the blocks up, we have in Jean-Pierre Houdin's internal ramp theory a hypothesis that is elegant, logical, and increasingly supported by tantalizing scientific evidence. It may not be the whole story, but it feels like we are looking at a major part of the solution. The truth is likely a combination of these methods. A short, heavy-duty external ramp for the base, a long, efficient internal ramp for the majority of the structure, and a system of levers and smaller ramps for the final placement of stones at the very top. Ultimately, the mystery of the pyramid's construction isn't a single question, but 1,000 smaller ones. And perhaps the most important question is not how, but why? Why pour the entire economic and human resources of a nation, for decades, into building these colossal, geometrically perfect stone mountains? The answer is that they were not just tombs. They were engines of creation. They were the focal point of a national religion, economy, and social structure. They were a project that organized and unified the early Egyptian state. They were a promise of eternity, a physical anchor for the soul of the king, and by extension, for the soul of Egypt itself. The sheer, unshakable, all-consuming power of that belief is the missing ingredient. It's the energy source that powered the whole operation, the one we can't quantify in a physics equation. The pyramids were not built with anti-gravity or alien power tools. They were built with sweat, rope, stone, water, wood, and an idea powerful enough to move mountains. The great archaeological mysteries like this one are so compelling because they hold a mirror up to us. They force us to question our own assumptions about the past and our own notions of what is possible. The story of the pyramid's construction is the ultimate story of human ingenuity against impossible odds. So I want to leave you with this. What part of this monumental mystery captivates you the most? Is it the brute force challenge of quarrying the granite in Aswan? Is it the subtle genius of using wet sand to move the sledges? Or is it the grand puzzle of the ramps? I genuinely want to hear what you think. Head down to the comments and share your thoughts. Which ramp theory, the straight, the zigzag, or Houdin's internal spiral makes the most sense to you? If you were an archaeologist on the Scan Pyramids team, what would you be hoping to find in that big void? If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most enduring enigmas, and you want to explore more stories that challenge our understanding of the past and the incredible achievements of those who came before us, make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell. There are so many more secrets buried under the sands of time, waiting for us to uncover them together. In the end, the Great Pyramid stands as a monument to a simple, profound truth, that with a shared purpose, meticulous organization, and a seemingly limitless supply of ingenuity, human beings are capable of achieving the truly impossible. For 4,500 years, it has guarded its secrets, challenging each new generation to try and solve its puzzle. And while we may be getting closer, I suspect it will always hold something back. It will always remain, in some small way, a perfect mystery, a silent, stone sentinel, reminding us of what we once were and what we might just be capable of again.